At dawn, the deputy sheriff knocked with an eviction notice. My daughter-in-law stood across the yard grinning and yelling, "Your time is up, old man. The house is ours now." I stayed perfectly calm and asked, "Who signed this garbage?" The deputy scanned the page, froze, and his mouth fell open in shock. "My name is Vincent Anderson. I'm 64 years old, and I've spent the last 4 years of retirement in my house on Desert Ridge Drive in Phoenix, Arizona. Before that, I spent 30 years as an FBI financial crimes investigator." You learn to read people in that job, every twitch, every lie, every scheme they think is clever. I thought I'd seen it all. Turns out I hadn't seen anything yet. My son Danny used to be different. I remember him at 8 years old sitting in my home office while I reviewed case files, asking endless questions about catching the bad guys. "Dad, how do you know who's lying?" He'd ask. I'd tell him the truth always leaves a trail if you know how to follow it. Everything changed when he married Patricia Anderson 3 years ago. At first, I tried to be diplomatic about it. Trish had that surface charm that works on people who don't look too closely. She worked as a hospital administrator, talked about helping people, always wearing designer clothes and driving a car that cost more than her salary should allow. Danny seemed happy, though, so I kept my observations to myself. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was trusting my daughter-in-law when she started visiting more frequently last fall. She'd drop by with papers asking me to sign insurance updates or estate planning documents. I'm an FBI investigator, was an FBI investigator, and I should have read every word, but she was family now, so I'd glance at the headers, see official-looking letterhead, and sign where she pointed. Her accomplice Gregory Martinez would hover nearby, always checking his phone, always asking casual questions about my savings, my pension, the house's value. I noticed things, of course, the way Trish's eyes would flicker toward Gregory before she answered my questions, how she'd started calling me Vincent instead of Dad like she used to, the expensive handbag she carried that costs more than most people's monthly mortgage. But I'm 64, not senile, and I've investigated enough con artists to recognize the pattern. I just never thought I'd see it in my own living room. The morning it all came apart started like any other Tuesday. I was in my garage workshop restoring an antique writing desk when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Then came the knock. Official, measured, the kind law enforcement learns at the academy. I opened the door to find a deputy sheriff standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable in the early Arizona heat. He was young, maybe mid-30s, with the rigid posture of someone who takes his job seriously. "Sir, I'm Deputy Carlos Martinez. I'm here to serve you with an eviction notice." For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I saw them, Trish and Gregory, standing beside their car across the street. Gregory had his phone out recording. When he saw me looking, he grinned and shouted loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "Your time's up, old man. The house is ours now." Trish stood beside him, saying nothing. She wouldn't even look at me. I turned back to Deputy Martinez, keeping my voice level. "May I see the documents, please?" He handed me a manila folder, his expression apologetic. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. I understand, Deputy." I opened the folder and everything inside me went cold. It was a quitclaim deed supposedly signed by me, transferring full ownership of 4251 Desert Ridge Drive to Patricia Anderson and Gregory Martinez, dated May 15th. Notarized. Everything looked official, everything except 3 things that screamed fraud to anyone who knew what to look for. First, the seal. It was positioned at a 15-degree angle. I'd been signing legal documents for 3 decades, and I never, not once, placed my seal anywhere but perpendicular to my signature line. Second, the signature itself. Close, but not quite right. The loop on my V was too wide, and I always cross my T's with a slight upward flourish. This didn't have it. Third, the seal was my old one. I'd updated my official seal 2 years ago after moving my home office. This was the design I'd stopped using in late 2022. I looked up at Deputy Martinez, really looked at him for the first time. His face was familiar, in that way young faces sometimes are when you've been in public service long enough. Then it clicked. "Carlos Martinez," I said slowly. "You worked security at the federal building, didn't you?" When I was still with the bureau, his eyes widened. "Agent Anderson, sir, I didn't realize." "You attended my retirement ceremony 4 years ago," I continued, my mind already working. "You gave a nice speech about how working with federal agents inspired you to pursue law enforcement." The blood drained from his face as he understood what he'd just walked into. Across the street, Gregory had stopped recording, sensing something was wrong. "Deputy Martinez, I need you to wait here for just 1 moment." "Don't go anywhere." I walked back into my house, my hands steady despite the anger building in my chest. In my office, my real office, the one I've maintained since retirement, I kept copies of every important document related to this property. I pulled out the folder containing the original deed, my updated seal impression, and my actual signature from recent bank documents. When I returned to the porch, Carlos was still standing there, but now he looked like a man who'd realized he was about to be part of something much bigger than a routine eviction. I handed him my folder. Compare these documents. Deputy, pay special attention to the seal placement and signature formation. I spent 30 years examining fraudulent documents for the FBI. This, I tapped the eviction notice, is amateur work. Carlos studied both sets of documents. I watched his jaw tighten as he saw what I'd seen immediately. Across the street, Gregory was walking toward us now, Trish trailing behind him. "What's the holdup?" he called out. "Just drag the old man out already." I ignored him. Instead, I looked at Carlos and spoke clearly, making sure my voice would carry. "This is fraud, Deputy Martinez, document forgery, and I intend to prove it." Carlos stood on my porch for a long moment, the two folders in his hands, one real, one fake. I could see him processing it all, the implications spreading across his face like ripples on water. "Sir, I apologize for this situation," he finally said. "Given the circumstances, I strongly advise you to contact an attorney immediately. This matter requires investigation." Gregory had reached the edge of my yard by then, his face twisted with frustration. "Hey, you can't just ignore official paperwork. We have every right. Step back, sir." Carlos's voice cut through Gregory's bluster with the authority of someone who'd had enough. "This situation is now under review. Any interference will result in your removal from the premises." Trish tried next, her voice taking on that pleading tone I'd heard before when Danny was dating her. "Vincent, please, can we just talk inside? This is all a misunderstanding." "No, Patricia." I kept my voice flat, emotionless. "There's nothing to discuss." Carlos nodded at me, then at Gregory and Trish. "I'll be filing a report about these discrepancies. You'll all be contacted." He walked back to his patrol car, and I watched Gregory's confidence crumble with every step the deputy took. After Carlos drove away, I expected them to leave. Instead, Trish approached my front door, tears streaming down her face. Real tears, too. She always could cry on command. "Vincent, please," she sobbed. "This is all Gregory's fault. He said it was just paperwork. I didn't know." I looked past her tears, past the performance, to what she was holding. A brand new iPhone 14 Pro, the case catching the morning sun. Those retail for about $1,200. And on the screen, clearly visible before she noticed me looking and tilted it away, was a confirmation email. "Your reservation in Las Vegas, $308 for weekend package. $3,800 for a Vegas weekend while trying to steal my house. Go home, Patricia." "But Vincent," I said, "go home." I stepped back and closed the door, locked it, stood there listening to her cry on my porch for another minute before Gregory called her back to the car. Only when I heard them drive away did I allow myself to feel the full weight of what my daughter-in-law had tried to do. I walked through my house. This house I'd bought 12 years ago when Danny graduated college, when my wife was still alive and the world made sense. Every room held memories. The kitchen where we'd hosted Danny and Trish's first Christmas dinner. The living room where Danny had announced their engagement. The backyard where I'd taught my grandson to throw a football last summer. When had it changed? I forced myself to think back, to really examine the past 9 months. Trish's first solo visit had been in September. She'd shown up on a Sunday afternoon with expensive coffee from that boutique place downtown. "I'm sorry Danny and I haven't been around more, Vincent," she'd said, settling onto the couch. "Gregory's been helping us with some financial planning, and it's been so hectic. I'd been happy to see her making an effort with family relationships. I hadn't questioned why, after 2 years of polite but distant interaction, she'd suddenly started calling me family." The second visit came in October. "Vincent, I was thinking about your estate planning. You've got everything organized, right? Just want to make sure you're protected." She'd had papers with her that time, forms about power of attorney, trust documents, beneficiary updates. I'd glanced at the headers. They looked legitimate, and I signed where she indicated. The third visit in November. Gregory had come along. He'd wandered through my house with the casual entitlement of someone evaluating property. "This place has got to be worth, what, $750,000, maybe more?" he'd asked. "Prime Phoenix real estate. You ever think about downsizing, Vincent? All this space for one person seems wasteful." I'd laughed it off then, made a joke about them prying my house keys from my cold, dead hands. Gregory had laughed too, but his eyes hadn't. By December, the visits were weekly. Always with papers, always with casual questions about my finances. January brought more sophisticated documents. February saw Gregory taking photos of rooms for insurance purposes. March, they started bringing potential contractors to help with maintenance. Now I understood. Every visit, every document, every casual question, they'd been building toward this. The forged deed was just the final piece of a 9-month campaign. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Timothy Reynolds, a real estate attorney who'd handled my house purchase 12 years ago. He answered on the second ring, Vince Anderson. To what do I owe this pleasure, Tim? I need a recommendation, best forensic document examiner in Phoenix. Someone who handles fraud cases. There was a pause. What kind of fraud are we talking about? The kind involving forged property deeds and family members who think a retired FBI agent won't notice amateur hour. Another pause, longer this time, Catherine Wilson. Former bureau document analyst, now private sector. She's expensive, but she's worth every penny. Handles this kind of thing regularly. I'll text you her number. Thanks, Tim, Vince, whatever's happening. Be careful, family cases get messy fast. I hung up and looked at my house again. My house, the one I'd paid off 5 years ago through careful planning and living below my means, the one where I'd raised my son, taught him right from wrong, showed him what integrity looked like. And my daughter-in-law had tried to steal it. I felt my old investigative instincts kicking in. I'd spent 3 decades watching people try to game the system, manipulate documents, exploit trust. I'd seen every trick, every scheme, every desperate play. They wanted to play games with an FBI agent who'd spent 30 years dealing with financial crimes. All right then, I said quietly to my empty living room, to the house that was still mine, to the future I was about to reclaim. Let's see how this plays out. The next morning, I had my first meeting with Catherine Wilson. Her office occupied the 3rd floor of a glass building on Central Avenue, the kind of place that charged by expertise rather than square footage. The receptionist offered coffee while I waited, which I accepted. Catherine herself was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with the kind of sharp competence that comes from years of catching liars through their paperwork. We shook hands and she gestured me to a chair across from her desk. Agent Anderson, Tim Reynolds spoke highly of you. Just Vince now. Haven't carried the badge in 4 years. Once bureau, always bureau in my book. She opened the folder I'd sent ahead. I've reviewed the documents you scanned over. This is quitclaim deed fraud. Textbook case. Walk me through what happened. I laid out the timeline methodically, a habit from years of building cases. The visits from Trish starting in September. Gregory's questions. The gradual escalation through the winter months. The morning Deputy Martinez appeared at my door. When I described spotting the forged seal angle and outdated design, Catherine leaned forward. You caught that immediately. I signed thousands of documents over 30 years. You develop an eye for these things. She smiled, the kind of smile investigators give when they realize they're working with someone who understands the game. This makes my job considerably easier. The deed is dated May 15th, allegedly notarized by Michelle Rodriguez. Have you contacted her? Not yet. Thought I'd wait for professional guidance. Smart. Let's visit her together this afternoon. If the notarization is legitimate, we have one problem. If it's forged, or if documents were switched, we have a federal case. 3 hours later, we sat in Michelle Rodriguez's modest office on Indian School Road. She was a woman in her early 40s who'd been notarizing documents in Maricopa County for 15 years. She knew me by reputation from my bureau days. When Catherine showed her the quitclaim deed, she put on reading glasses and studied it carefully. That's my seal, she said slowly, or rather, it looks like my seal. She turned to her computer, pulling up digital records. May 15th. Yes, I notarized a document that day for Patricia Anderson, but it was a power of attorney for healthcare decisions, not a quitclaim deed. The silence in that office felt heavy. You're certain? Catherine asked. Absolutely. I log every document. Look, here's my entry. Power of attorney for medical decisions, standard form. She said it was in case her father-in-law had a health emergency. Michelle's face had gone pale. Someone used my seal on a different document, or switched documents after you notarized one of them, Catherine said. Either way, this is forgery. We left with a sworn statement from Michelle and copies of her records. In Catherine's car, I stared out the window at Phoenix traffic, my mind working through the implications. They planned this for months, I said. Every visit, every paper she asked me to sign. They were setting up the infrastructure. Most fraud happens over time, Catherine agreed. The question is what else they might have attempted. I'd recommend we dig deeper into Patricia and Gregory's finances. If they're desperate enough to forge property documents, there's usually more beneath the surface. She gave me her retainer agreement. $50,000, which I paid that evening via bank transfer. 2 days later, Catherine delivered her preliminary report. She spread documents across my dining table while I made coffee. The Arizona sun streamed through my kitchen windows as she laid out the extent of the betrayal. Gregory Martinez lists himself as a financial consultant, but there's no registered business, no clients we can identify. What there is, however, is a pattern of cash deposits into Patricia's accounts, ranging from $5,000 to $15,000 each, totaling about $85,150 over the past year. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Where's the money coming from? Best we can tell, various casinos around Phoenix and Las Vegas. Patricia has a serious gambling problem, Vince. She's been funding it through cash advances on credit cards, but those are maxed out now. Your house was their escape plan. Catherine pulled up bank statements on her laptop. Look at this pattern. Every Friday, she drives to Talking Stick Casino. Sometimes she wins, usually she loses. When she wins, the money goes to luxury purchases. When she loses, she takes cash advances. The picture became crystal clear. They'd forge the deed, sell my house quickly, use the money to pay off Patricia's gambling debts, and disappear before I could prove fraud. There's one more thing, Catherine said quietly. I found evidence Gregory's been meeting with potential buyers for your property. He's already promised it to a cash buyer for $70,000 below market value for a quick sale, when the sale was scheduled for next week. If Deputy Martinez hadn't shown up when he did, you would have been homeless before you knew what hit you. That evening, I was in my workshop when my phone rang. Danny's name appeared on the screen. Dad? His voice was strained, confused. Trish is crying. She says there's been some misunderstanding about legal papers. What's going on? I looked at the half-restored desk on my workbench. Son, your wife tried to steal my house. Silence on the other end. Dad, that's impossible. Trish wouldn't, Danny. I've got forensic evidence. She forged documents. She and Gregory Martinez planned this for months. Gregory's just helping us with financial planning, and Trish has been trying to help you get organized. She's been setting me up to be robbed. More silence. Then, Dad, maybe you're confused. Maybe you signed something and forgot. That's when I knew how deep the manipulation went. Danny, I'm going to send you something. Financial records, document analysis, the whole story. Look at it with your own eyes. Dad, I can't take sides against my wife based on... I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. After I hung up, I realized this was going to be harder than I thought. They hadn't just tried to steal my house. They'd stolen my son. The next week brought the confrontation I'd been preparing for. Catherine had built an airtight case, forensic document analysis showing forgery with 99% certainty, bank records proving Patricia's gambling debts, evidence of their plan to sell my house to cover those debts. Tim Reynolds filed the lawsuit Tuesday morning. By Thursday, Gregory and Patricia were served with papers. By Friday, they'd hired William Jackson, one of Phoenix's most aggressive defense attorneys. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I walked into that courtroom like I'd walked into federal courtrooms for 30 years. This was my element. This was where truth separated from lies. Judge Alexander Foster presided. I didn't know him personally, but his reputation was solid, fair, thorough, no patience for games. Jackson went first, painting a picture of confused elderly man and devoted family trying to help with estate planning. He produced photos of happier times, holiday dinners, family gatherings. He suggested I'd sign the documents willingly and was now suffering from memory issues. Your Honor, my clients Patricia and Gregory Martinez simply tried to help Mr. Anderson organize his affairs. The quitclaim deed was signed as part of estate planning discussions that lasted several months. Now suffering from understandable age-related confusion, he's accusing his own family of fraud. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was cataloging every word. Age-related confusion. This was his angle. Then Catherine presented our case, document by document, signature by signature. She methodically destroyed their story. The forged seal, the switched notarization, the gambling debts, the planned quick sale. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A forensic document analysis conducted by Thomas Wheeler, certified examiner with 25 years of experience. Mr. Wheeler's analysis conclusively demonstrates that the signature on the quitclaim deed was forged. The pressure points, the pen strokes, the letter formations, all inconsistent with Mr. Anderson's authentic signature. Probability of forgery, 99%. Jackson shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. We haven't had the opportunity to examine this expert's credentials. Mr. Wheeler's credentials are attached to his report, Mr. Jackson. Sit down. Judge Foster was already reading the analysis, his expression growing colder with each page. Catherine continued. Exhibit B sworn testimony from Michelle Rodriguez, the notary whose seal appears on the document. Ms. Rodriguez's records show she notarized a power of attorney on the date in question, not a quitclaim deed. Someone substituted documents after notarization. I watched Patricia's face. The color was draining from it slowly like water leaving a bathtub. Beside her, Gregory had stopped taking notes. Exhibit C, bank records showing Patricia Anderson's gambling activities totaling $85,000 in losses over the past 12 months. The defendants needed Mr. Anderson's property to cover these debts. Then came the audio recordings. Catherine's voice was calm, almost clinical. Exhibit D. Legally obtained recordings of conversations between the defendants discussing the planned sale of Mr. Anderson's property. Gregory's voice filled the courtroom. Once we get the house, we need to move fast, sell it before he can fight back. Patricia's voice followed. What about Vincent? Where does he go? Gregory again. Who cares? Assisted living somewhere cheap. He won't even know the difference in a few years. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I watched Gregory's face drain of color. Patricia put her head in her hands. Even Jackson looked like he'd been gut-punched. These are not confused children trying to help an aging parent, Catherine said quietly. These are criminals who planned for months to defraud Mr. Anderson of his home and his dignity. They forged documents, they manipulated notaries. And when they succeeded, they planned to abandon Mr. Anderson in the cheapest facility they could find. Judge Foster called a 20-minute recess. I watched Patricia and Gregory huddle with Jackson, saw the panic in their whispered conversation, the way Jackson kept shaking his head. When Foster returned, his expression was granite. I've reviewed all evidence presented. The forensic analysis is conclusive. The notary testimony is definitive. The recorded conversations are damning. He looked at Patricia and Gregory with cold assessment. The quitclaim deed dated May 15th is hereby declared fraudulent and void. All property rights to 4251 Desert Ridge Drive remain with Vincent Anderson. He paused, and the silence was absolute. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. This appears to be interstate fraud involving federal banking regulations. 2 weeks later, federal agents arrested Patricia and Gregory. The charges were serious. Mail fraud, wire fraud, interstate transportation of forged documents. They faced years in federal prison. Danny finally saw the evidence. Really saw it. The phone recordings, the financial statements, the planned disposal of his childhood home. He came to my house that evening, tears in his eyes. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have seen, son, she's your wife. You wanted to believe the best. That's not wrong, but I almost lost you. She almost took everything. We sat on my back patio, looking out at the desert sunset, two men trying to rebuild trust that had been shattered by someone we both loved. 6 months later, Patricia received 18 months in federal prison plus restitution. Gregory got 3 years. Their lawyer, Jackson, faced a bar investigation for knowingly presenting fraudulent evidence. Danny and I are rebuilding our relationship slowly. Some damage heals, some doesn't, but we're working on it, one conversation at a time. I finished restoring that antique desk. It sits in my office now, beautiful and functional, ready for another century of use. Some things can be restored, some things can't. Justice isn't revenge. It's making sure actions have consequences, that truth matters more than manipulation. I spent my career fighting for that principle. These past months, I fought for it again. Standing in my workshop, running my hand over the restored desk's smooth surface, I felt something settle inside me. Not happiness exactly, there was too much loss for that, but satisfaction, completion. My house remained mine, the legal system had worked, and somewhere in federal prison, two people were learning that trying to con a career FBI agent was the worst mistake they'd ever made. I picked up my next project, an old bookshelf that needed refinishing. The wood was damaged, the joints loose, but underneath I could see quality craftsmanship. It would take months of careful work to restore it properly. I had the time, I had my home, I had my peace. Life, as it always does, moved forward. Trust isn't something you inherit through marriage or blood. It's something you earn through actions. And once broken by betrayal, it takes more than tears and apologies to rebuild. The greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's using the system they tried to game against you to ensure they face the full consequences of their choices.